At the end of previous lecture, we were talking about the directional behavior that the antennas display when radiating power. For dipole antennas, the variations with phi are not there, but variations with theta are governed by equations which we know, depending on the length of the antenna with respect to the wavelength. Okay. One very important concept that we use in this connection is that of a solid angle. It is a 3D angle subtended by an object. Okay. You don't have to worry too much about understanding this concept, but at least get what we need to know for the sake of antenna engineering. So this is something that I have taken from somewhere. The solid angle, it is generally denoted by the same symbol that we use for ohm, is the two-dimensional angle but measured in three-dimensional space. It essentially measures how large an object will look at a point. Okay, so you have to remember this word, solid angle, which we would soon be using for describing the performance properties of the antennas. I'll be defining it mathematically again. The units for solid angle are stir radians or steradian. Depending on where you read, you see a different definition. It is essentially the area of the object divided by square of the distance between the object and the origin. Okay. The solid angle subtended by a closed surface is 4 pi stir radians. It can be proven rigorously, but we will not do that. We have to get back to antennas with this concept in mind. Okay. There's a lot of things given here, but that's not the issue right now. Important thing is how to use the concept of solid angle to describe the gain of the antenna. Now, radiation pattern, as I was explaining last time, is the behavior of the magnitude of radiated electric field with theta and phi for a given R. For dipoles, the dependence on phi is not there, so we worry only about dependence on theta. Now, here's a write-up that tells you things that you are supposed to know already. An antenna has the following main functions: to radiate EM energy, we know that, or receive EM energy. If it is a transmit antenna, it would radiate. If it is a receive antenna, it would receive. Okay. To act as an impedance matching network, to match the impedance of the transmission line between transmitter output and antenna input to the free space. Yeah, it is essentially maximum power transfer theorem that we try to satisfy to couple maximum power coming from the transmitter's output to the antenna's input. To direct the transmitted or received EM energy into desired direction, that is the thing we are going to look at today. The antenna can be made to radiate in certain directions and can be made to radiate almost nothing in other directions. It all depends on the antenna nature, how you designed it, etc. etc. Okay. It's a directional behavior that is seen. Now, omnidirectional antenna or isotropic antenna is something we know already as one which radiates uniformly in all theta phi directions. It's a hypothetical concept, but very valid for comparison purposes with real life antennas. Radiation pattern, mathematically speaking, is defined as the 3D graphical representation of the radiation of the antenna as a function of theta phi. It's a 3D plot, essentially speaking. But we generally try to take cross sections of the plot or projections of the 3D plot on 2D planes. The electric field strength, E magnitude, is volts per meter. And we call it field strength pattern. There was a time people were plotting radiated power versus theta phi. That kind of pattern was known as power pattern. Today, generally, we use field strength pattern, which means magnitude of E is plotted with theta and phi if necessary. Okay. So power pattern is something you can probably forget about. Now, power radiated per unit solid angle in a given direction is known as radiation intensity. I'll be talking about it more also later. The shape of the radiation pattern is independent of R, relative shape. The actual magnitudes will of course change with R value. But if you plot relative magnitudes, then the shape will be the same as long as R is large enough, as long as you are in far field. Relative radiation pattern means you take the maximum value and divide all other values by that value. We know that E theta and H phi are the only two fields that survive. So E theta is tangential to the direction of propagation R. For a vertical dipole, we know that E has only theta component. Horizontal loop, we have not yet spoken about, so forget it right now. A radiation pattern is a 3D plot, and 2D cross sections are usually taken in two different planes. One of them is known as horizontal plane, which is theta equal to pi by 2. That is XY plane. We take a projection of the 3D plot in XY plane. That is called horizontal pattern. We also choose a vertical pattern. We also plot a vertical pattern in a plane which is characterized by phi equal to some constant value, so that theta dependence can be described for that particular value of phi. Polarization is a concept we have looked at in engineering electromagnetics course already. It means the tip of the E vector, how it moves, on what locus does it move with time. It's an important concept for antennas also, and we will be revisiting it later. Okay, so I think there's a lot here, but let's quickly summarize what we know about dipole antennas. For Hertzian dipole, we know that E in far field is E theta, and the equation is given here. So you can see that the variation with theta will be governed by sine theta, and variation with phi is a pure circle. Okay. Very easy to figure out this. And assuming that small r is constant, lambda is constant, I is constant, dl is constant. All that is assumed, of course. So theta equal to 0, that means along the length of the dipole, there will be no E. And at theta equal to pi by 2, that means vertical to the length of the dipole, you'll see maximum E field coming out. And in between, there will be sinusoidal behavior. Theta can go from 0 to 2 pi. This is Hertzian dipole we are looking at. Horizontal radiation pattern is a circle. That means phi dependence is not there. There will be a plot coming soon. Yeah. The vertical pattern is governed by sine theta. So you see a figure of 8 type of configuration or type of radiation pattern. The horizontal pattern is a circle because no phi dependence is there. This is famously known as figure of 8 for obvious reasons. It looks like an 8 here. The pattern in B looks like a figure of 8, and that is the word commonly used in the books. For a lambda by 2 dipole, the formula changes a little bit. E is given by equation 2. So here the dependence on theta is slightly more complicated. You have to write a MATLAB program to actually get the values. And for a dipole of any arbitrary length, the formula is even more complicated. We have derived these formulas. Okay. However, for specific values of length is 2h, you know. For specific values of length, you can do the calculation. And for L equal to lambda by 2, that is half wave dipole, you still see a figure of 8 with theta. Only thing is, it is not edge wide edge that for Hertzian dipole, but it is still figure of 8. You can check it by writing a program and doing the calculations. L equal to lambda, full wave dipole, also see the figure of 8, but the shape of 8 starts getting narrower. L equal to 1.5 lambda gives a very peculiar pattern. You see 4 different directions in which maxima occur of equal strength, and 2 more directions in which maxima of lower strengths occur. They are called secondary maxima. And in between there are directions in which no radiation will go out. They are called nulls, N-U-L-L-S. The 1.5 lambda is a very complicated type of dipole. You prefer to avoid this. In fact, most of the dipoles in real life are not allowed to go beyond lambda length because things start getting a lot more difficult to handle. L equal to 2 lambda also gives you funny behavior. I've tried to sketch it as close as possible to what is given in the book. And you can carry on the exercise for bigger values of lambda using the basic formula for magnitude of E, which is equation 3. Now, what besides radiation pattern, what else is important in an antenna? Radiation pattern, of course, is important. Customer would like to know this right away before even thinking of buying your antenna. Gain, the direction in which maximum radiation is occurring, how strong is that radiation compared to, let's say, average radiation intensity. That is a number we will define officially very soon. Directivity is also a related value that we will define very soon. Beam width is another parameter which relates to how narrow or how wide the transmitted beam is in the direction of maximum. Bandwidth, that means over what value of input signal frequency the performance is acceptable. Center frequency, that means the single design frequency for which the antenna has been designed. In some cases, you do a wideband design, then center frequency is important, but not that important. But in cases where the antenna is primarily good at one frequency and over a small bandwidth around that frequency, center frequency becomes a lot more critical to know about. There are other things like effective length, effective area. We'll be discussing all this. Radiation efficiency essentially means output power divided by input power. Output power is radiated power, WR. Input power is WT. And the difference between the two is the lost power because of the antenna losses. We call it WL or W loss. Polarization also is critical. We'll be talking about it later. So these are some of the performance parameters of an antenna that in the real world are quite important to know. Okay. Now again, some repetition is there. Isotropic antenna, I've told you several times what it is, and here it's written once again. Radiation pattern, we have already looked at these two possible projections of the 3D plot. Okay. Now this is a pictorial description of radiation pattern. You can see that assuming that the z-axis is vertically oriented here, then theta equal to 0 is the direction in which maximum radiation is occurring. And as you go on both sides of that value of theta, you see radiated power going down. The points at which the power goes down to half, or the magnitude of V goes down to 1 upon square root of 2 of the maximum value, those 2 points are known as 3 dB points or half power points. The values of the value range of theta over which this occurs is known as half power beam width. The width of the beam over which the power falls from maximum to half, or E falls from maximum to maximum divided by square root of 2 on both sides of theta equal to 0. So that is one quantifying parameter which tells you how narrow the beam is or how wide the beam is. Then there are directions in which no radiation is going out, no E in those directions, and those directions are known as nulls. Side lobes are maxima but of a smaller magnitude. It depends on the antenna how many side lobes would be seen. Okay. So side lobes, principal maximum or principal lobe, beam width, and null. These probably are the 4 most important parameters of radiation pattern. Same thing described pictorially. You probably cannot read everything, but I think you can make out. Half power beam width, main maximum, side lobes, nulls. Maxima can occur on the backside also. Fortunately, in this case, the principal maximum is very large compared to other maxima. Other maxima are known as secondary maxima. You ideally don't want them. In practice, you try to make their amplitude as small as possible compared to the amplitude of the main maximum or principal maximum. Yeah, this we have seen already. Magnitude of E will depend on magnitude of sine theta. So that gives you figure of 8. We have seen all this already. So let me bypass this. Yeah, figure of 8 right here. Yeah, figure of 8 for lambda by 2 dipole also, but this figure of 8 is slightly narrower. For lambda dipole also, we see figure of 8, but even more narrow. And for bigger dipoles, you start seeing funny behavior. I've got this previously also in this stuff. 2 lambda dipole is even more complicated and so on. I'll show you a comprehensive diagram soon from the book itself. This is again what we have seen previously. So let me move forward. Yeah, this is from the book itself. Very accurately drawn compared to the sketches that I have shown. For various values of length, and assuming a center-fed vertical dipole, they are showing the horizontal pattern, which means theta equal to pi by 2, and vertical pattern, which means phi is having some constant value. Now let's see. A is horizontal pattern for all lengths. Whatever be the length of the dipole, the horizontal pattern will always be a circle because there is no phi dependence in E field. So that is not repeated every time the length changes. Now B is vertical pattern for short dipole or Hertzian dipole. If the dipole is a Hertzian dipole, you get figure of 8 because it's sine theta type of dependence, right? We have seen that already. Now C is lambda by 2 dipole. The vertical pattern is a figure of 8, but it is narrower compared to vertical pattern for a short dipole or Hertzian dipole. Then D is lambda long dipole. Here also you see figure of 8, but even narrower. And then E is length equal to 1.5 lambda. You see the behavior. It's very complicated. And F is 2 lambda long dipole. Here the behavior is complicated, although not as complicated as in E. You see more than one maxima in E and F. 4 maxima are there of equal size. Fortunately, in F, there is no side lobe. Nulls are there, but side lobes are not there. In E, even nulls are there, even side lobes are there, which are quite strong in amplitude compared to amplitude of the principal maximum. And actually, there are 4 principal maxima in both E and F. So these kind of lengths generally are avoided unless you are very careful in utilizing the behavior. Now, all this is theory. And of course, if you want to go for a monopole, the only top half would apply. Bottom half will not be there because a ground plane will come in, which will remove the bottom half of the radiation pattern with theta. With phi, nothing would change, of course. Now, this is theory, okay? Now, in practice, what happens? These are experimentally obtained radiation patterns for several lengths of the dipole. Lambda by 2 dipole. You get figure of 8 as theory predicted. B is in case B, it is still lambda by 2 dipole, but it is being fed not from center, but from the end, which is a case that we have not looked at theoretically, but it is possible to do theory in that case also. Only thing is the assumed current distributions will be different from what we assumed for center fed dipole. Dipoles fed from the end are also fairly common. So in that case, the figure of 8 is there, but it is much wider. This is all experimental data. It tells you that theory is not that bad. C is full wave center fed, narrow figure of 8 as expected. D is full wave and it is fed 1/4 away from one of the ends. Close enough to what theory predicted, and so on, Many more cases are shown. where experimental dependence of magnitude of E on theta was measured and plotted. Okay. Again, the definitions are already with you. I have told you several times. They are given once again here. If the principal maximum is along, say, a direction theta max, then on both sides you'll see some range of theta values over which the magnitude of E is between maximum and maximum divided by square root of 2. So that range is known as theta 3 dB. Half power beam width, HPBW. It tells you how narrow or how wide the beam is, essentially. Side lobes are there, smaller values, null directions are also there. Basically, the formula for E helps you in figuring out all these things, either analytically or using numerical calculations. Repetition. Main lobe, back lobe is possible in some cases. In this case, even on the back side, there is strong enough radiation, although it is not as strong as radiation on the front side, but it is wasting the power. So it's not a good design for sure. And in between, you see lot of side lobes of varying amplitudes. And in between, there are nulls, in which direction no radiation will go out. So main lobe is important, but everything else is also almost equally important. Ideally, you want only main lobe and nothing else, so that no power is lost. But in practice, it's not possible. You try to reduce the undesirable radiation as much as possible. That's the nature of the game. Okay. Now, one very important parameter that is associated with antennas, especially linear antennas, is the so-called effective length. It's a hypothetical length which can be calculated for a given antenna. Let's look at the definition first. If the antenna is in the transmit mode, and we will assume dipole antennas for now, the upper half has length L by 2, lower half has length L by 2. Small z equal to 0 represents the center of the antenna. The current distributions we already know will look like what is shown here. If this is the case, the effective length is defined by this formula. You take the integral of Iz over the entire length of the antenna and divide the result by the maximum current. In fact, not maximum, the current at the feed point that's going in. So what it tells you is the length of a hypothetical antenna, which will have the same behavior as the given antenna, but which will have a constant current of some value and length, physical length equal to effective length. If you're not sure, just forget it. Take this mathematical definition for sure. This is for transmit antennas. Input current divides the total integral of Iz with dz over the length of the antenna. That's how L effective is supposed to be calculated for a given antenna. In receive mode, the definition is, suppose you have an E field impinging the receive antenna and the magnitude of that E field is E. And suppose because of that impinging, an open circuit voltage across the output terminals of the antenna is generated, and the magnitude of that voltage is VOC. We are assuming the direction of E as going up. So VOC with polarity shown divided by E and with a minus sign. Minus sign has been brought in to maintain the correct polarity definitions. It does not mean length will be negative. effective length will not be negative. In receive antennas, effective length is defined as shown by equation 2, minus VOC by E. With the polarity shown for measuring VOC, E should be going downwards, right? But actually we are assuming it going upwards. That's why minus sign has been brought in. For practical calculations, you forget minus sign. It is the magnitude of VOC divided by magnitude of E. That determines the effective length of a receive antenna. And it has been shown that the definition of L effective given by equation 2 and equation 1 are identical to each other. There is a principle of equivalence. The same antenna used in transmit mode will have the same effective length as it will have in the receive mode. I'm not proving it, but these two definitions, 1 and 2, are identical to each other. It can be shown. Only thing is, depending on the application nature of the antenna, we use a different method of calculating effective. VOC is the open circuit voltage at the antenna terminals produced by a uniform exciting field E parallel to the antenna. That's also the assumption. The negative sign in equation 2 has been used to conform with conventional polarity markings, upper terminal positive. So in reality, minus sign will not apply when you do the calculations. Now let's look at how to figure out effective length of some of the dipole antennas. Hertzian dipole is the simplest one. Current is constant along its length, right? So if you use the transmit definition for effective length, IZ dz integrated will give you simply IDL, and I naught is also I. So the result will be simply DL. Effective length of a Hertzian dipole is simply DL, the length of the antenna. You don't need mathematics for it. Okay, that's why I've written the answer. Now, for a short dipole, what would happen? This will be a little more interesting, I think. Remember, in short dipole, we assumed linear currents in the upper half and bottom half of the antenna. These were the two equations. The peak current was occurring at the center. So if you go by the definition in equation 1, I naught is Im. And the integral will break into two parts depending on the range of Z, because equations are different in the two halves of the antenna. So I'm plugging in those equations which we have derived in the past for current in the upper half of the antenna and current in the lower half of the antenna. Okay. In the lower half, you have the first term coming in. In the upper half, you have got the second term coming. This is how you have to write the total integral involved. Then you simplify the result carefully. It is simple, just that you have to do it correctly there. Okay, so I'm sure you will be able to follow these steps easily. The answer that you get after doing all this is L by 2. The length of the short dipole divided by 2 is the effective length. So it is not equal to the length of the antenna, as was the case for Hertzian dipole. For a short dipole, the effective length is half the physical length. Then half wave dipole. Let's repeat the exercise again. Here we know that currents are given by these two equations, 1A and 1B, depending on the range of Z. And for a lambda by 2 dipole, of course, this simplifies a little bit because the total length is lambda by 2. So total length is supposed to be 2h. So h becomes lambda by 4, beta h becomes pi by 2. If you put that there, the current equations in the two halves essentially become the same. For lambda by 2 dipole, the antenna current has same equation in upper half and lower half. That's what I've shown here. Because beta h is pi by 2. Anyway, so that helps. Then I apply the definition of L effective. I0, of course, can be obtained by putting Z equal to 0. So you get Im. L effective is 1 upon I0 and the integral of Iz dz over the entire length. And now we have only one equation, whether top half or bottom half, we get the same equation because h happens to be lambda by 4. So I plug in those values and I integrate directly from minus h to plus h. Simplify the result. I get 2 divided by beta sine beta h. Fortunately or unfortunately, beta h is also known because it's a lambda by 2 dipole. So h is lambda by 4. Okay, so I've plugged in those values. The answer is lambda divided by pi. For a lambda by 2 dipole, the effective length is lambda divided by pi. And the length is lambda by 2. So you can write the answer also as 2L by pi. It's your choice. Basically, what is happening is as you increase the length of the dipole, the departure from constant current assumption is becoming more and more. So the values are becoming different and different with length. Okay. In fact, there is a formula for calculating effective length of dipole of any arbitrary length as well, which I have given in the second document. This problem, of course, is already solved in the previous document. So let me not waste your time. This one is already solved. You can look at this solution compared to the one shown in the previous document. Monopole antenna, I would like you to do it yourself. Figure out effective length of a short monopole antenna. Now, this is the one that you may find very interesting. Suppose the dipole length is any arbitrary value. Can we calculate L effective? Okay, we are using monopole antenna here. Fine. This is for monopole. So only top half would apply. That's why the limit is only from 0 to h. And we know the formula for current in the top half. So we plug it in and do the calculations. What we get is what I'm showing here. You can double check my answer. Okay. And then the next problem says quarter wave monopole antenna. So that's a specific case for previous problem. You put h equal to lambda by 4. This is the answer you get. Yeah, this last one actually is the most interesting one that I like to talk about. If it's a dipole of any arbitrary length L equal to 2h, what happens? the integral breaks into two different parts and different equations are used for IZ. I've tried to simplify this result by doing integration and putting the limits. I ended up getting this equation. I'll double check this before I send you the document because I have some doubts about it. Actually. Sine square should not be coming. I'll double check this calculation, but basic philosophy is that the definition of effective length can be applied to almost any dipole antenna or almost any monopole antenna. It's not easy to apply the definition for antennas which are of 2D nature, but we'll try our best when we get to 2D antennas. Antenna gain, the biggest parameter that people worry about when looking at an antenna. The ability of an antenna to concentrate the radiated power in a given direction, in case of a transmit antenna, or the ability of an antenna to effectively absorb incident power from that direction, if the antenna is a receive antenna. Both are specified in terms of antenna gain. For same antenna will have same gain whether it is being used in transmit mode or receive. Antenna gain can be defined in several different manners. We'll be defining it soon. Power gain, directive gain, and directivity. Now the concept of solid angle comes in soon. But before that, let me summarize Poynting vector once again. The power radiated by an antenna per unit area in any theta phi direction is given by the Poynting vector, right? We know this. The definition is given here again, half Re E cross H complex conjugate. And for far field, E is going to have only E theta component, H will have only H phi component. So these are the equations that apply. And we also know that E theta divided by H phi is eta naught, assuming air medium. Let's say the magnitude of Poynting vector is S. It's a scalar then. And if E represents the magnitude of E, that means magnitude of E theta. And let's say we are talking only RMS value for E. You can easily see by applying equation 1, and because you are measuring E and H in RMS values, 2 would disappear. And E and H are related by eta naught also. You can try to figure it out yourself very easily. What will happen is you'll get a relation between E and S, where both S and E are scalars. S is the magnitude of Poynting vector, E is the magnitude of the radiated electric field. We are assuming far field conditions, yes. So Poynting vector is related to RMS value of radiated electric field by equation 7. You can prove it very easily looking at equations given here. Now solid angle. If you have a small area dA and its distance from origin is small r, then dA divided by r square is known as the solid angle, subtended by dA on the origin. The unit is ster-radian. Instead of radian, we say ster-radian to distinguish it from 2D angles. Actually, it's a 2D angle, but it is applicable to 3D surfaces. Let's put it this way. It's not a 3D angle even now. Okay, so remember this definition. Don't worry about going too far in solving problems on solid angle. That's not the objective in this course. So d omega solid angle subtended by the area dA is dA divided by r, as simple as that. Okay. The units are ster-radians or SR. For a sphere, the total surface area subtended is 4 pi r square, and that divided by r square, because that's the way solid angle is defined. Total area divided by total surface area of the object divided by distance square. In case of a sphere, the total surface area is 4 pi r square. That divided by r square gives you 4 pi. So a sphere subtends a solid angle of 4 pi on the origin, assuming that origin is at the center of this. For other solid objects also, it is possible to calculate the total solid angle subtended. Now, a very important concept before we define gain of the antenna is the so-called radiation intensity. I am denoting it by capital phi. That's what Jordan and Waldman book does. In many other books, you will find a symbol U, capital U. Okay, so live with that. Pointing vector is power radiated per unit area. Radiation intensity is power radiated per unit solid angle in a given theta phi direction. So many watts per star radian. Okay. The radiation intensity capital phi in a given direction is defined as the power radiated per unit solid angle in that direction. So we write phi of theta phi equal to r square s. Why? It is shown within the brackets here. S is WR divided by area A, right? I can modify that to WR divided by A by R square, and then the entire thing multiplied by 1 upon R square. Now A upon R square is the solid angle. So WR upon A upon R square is the power radiated per unit solid angle, that is the radiation intensity. And 1 upon R square remains. So radiation intensity is Poynting vector multiplied by R square. It's a very useful relation that we will be using. And we already know that Poynting vector is E square divided by eta naught right here. And radiation intensity is R square into Poynting vector. So putting that together and showing explicitly theta phi dependence, I write the radiation intensity as equation 11. I know it's a bit boring, but let's go through it. This is the radiation intensity in any theta phi direction. It can be calculated based on E value known and the distance at which you are doing it. The average radiation intensity is also defined. It is radiated power, total radiated power divided by the total solid angle, which is 4 pi for a sphere. There are two radiation intensity definitions. One is the actual one, which will change with theta and phi. Actually, for dipoles, it will change only with theta. The other one is not changing with theta phi. It is the average total radiated power divided by the total solid angle, phi average. Now, in a given theta phi direction, the ratio of phi theta phi divided by phi average is known as the directional gain. The radiation intensity in a given direction divided by average radiation intensity is known as the directive gain of the antenna in that direction. It's a little cumbersome definition, but that's the way it is. Directive gain, we represent it by small g with a suffix d, small d, and it's a function of theta and phi. The directive gain in any direction is defined as the ratio of radiation intensity in that direction and the average radiation intensity. Capital phi divided by capital phi average. Okay. So this is the weightage. Now phi average is WR divided by 4 pi. So I can rewrite 13 H14. It is conventional to express the directive gain in dB. In that case, we simply take 10 log and use capital letter, capital G with a suffix small t. Actually, nowadays many books mix symbols anyway, but in Jordan and Baldwin's book, they are very clear that when gain values are in dB, they use capital letters. When they are not in dB, they use small letters. Okay. Now, another related performance parameter is directivity, which is nothing but maximum value of GD in whatever direction it happens. Okay. Directivity is the maximum value of directive gain. And power gain is another interesting definition where what we do is in equation 14, instead of WR, we use input power. In case the antenna is lossless, it is meaningless anyway, because WR will be equal to WT anyway. But to capture the reality that antenna is not necessarily lossless all the time. In fact, it's never lossless, but in many cases losses are negligible. But supposing losses are not negligible, then to capture that reality, we reuse equation 14, but we replace WR by input power, which is WT, and define a so-called power gain. For a lot of antennas, power gain and directive gain are almost equal anyway. So the only difference is WR has been replaced by WT. And of course, for power gain, we use a symbol GP. In dB, we use capital G with a suffix P. The input power WT is radiated power plus lost power. If lost power is 0, then obviously WT equal to WR and GP will be equal to GD. Okay. Which actually is given a common symbol G, which is known as antenna gain. Antenna gain means we are ignoring losses, and whatever is the value of GD or GP, that is antenna gain. So remember, antenna gain, directive antenna gain, power gain, and directivity. These are 4 different terms which you will encounter when describing antenna gain. In fact, most vendors simply say antenna gain. That's it. That means they are not worrying about losses in giving you that number. Now, efficiency, radiation efficiency is defined as output power, which is WR, divided by input power, which is WT. And WT is WR plus WL. So it's very easy to prove that eta is GP by GD. If losses are negligible, eta is 1, which is 100%. Now, application of all this. In a Hertzian dipole, let's calculate the directivity. Directivity is nothing but maximum value of directive gain. And by default, we would ignore losses. So the concept of power gain will not be taken up. We know it is same as the directive gain. Now, how do you calculate directivity for a Hertzian dipole? You know that we will assume far field conditions. We know that E theta formula is like what we are showing here. For a Hertzian dipole, this is the formula we have proven. So the magnitude of E theta, which is simply E, can be worked out as equation 2. And if I take effective value or RMS value on both sides, then I would be replaced by I effective. Okay. And if I take effective value, you know that I have called it E when defining Poynting vector. So E is simply beta eta naught I effective dl divided by 4 pi r and the entire thing multiplied by sine theta. Radiation resistance for a Hertzian dipole, we know the formula 80 pi square dl by lambda square. So the total radiated power will be R rad into I effective square. We know that that is the way radiation resistance is supposed to be defined. I effective is I divided by square root of 2. We know that also. So the average power, average radiation intensity is WR divided by 4 pi. We have defined it already. WR is R rad into I effective square divided by 4 pi. That gives you average radiation intensity. Okay. The directive gain is 4 pi divided by WR into radiation intensity in a theta phi direction. So I put the values 4 pi divided by R rad I effective square and phi effective we have already seen. Radiation intensity we have already seen in terms of E. Let me go back. Yeah, this equation 11. I know E value for Hertzian dipole, so I'm putting that in and I'm reusing this equation there. You'll have to practice all this a little bit to feel comfortable with these derivations. So I'm plugging in those values. E square has been used here based on E that I have calculated here in equation 2. Okay. So the radiation intensity in a theta phi direction, after a lot of simplifications, a lot of things cancel out here. What you get is 1.5 sine square theta. No, yeah, it's not radiation intensity. Sorry, this is the directive gain. Okay, I'm using the formula for radiation intensity in the directive gain formula, and I see that a lot of cancellations happen in the algebra itself. The final result, you can try to double check this, is directive gain equal to 1.5 times sine square theta for a Hertzian dipole. Once you have figured out directive gain, directivity is the maximum value of directive gain. So it is 1.5, obviously. It will happen when theta equal to pi by 2. Directivity is simply GD max, which is 1.5. You take 10 log of that, then you can express the answer in dB. It works out to almost 1.76 dB. So directivity of a Hertzian dipole, which is the maximum value of directive gain, which occurs at theta equal to pi by 2, that means at right angles to the length of the wire, the value of that is 1.5 without dB. In dB, it is 1.76 approximately. 10 log of 1.5 will give you about 1.76 dB. Now the next challenge, take a lambda by 2 dipole and repeat the directivity calculation. For other lengths, it is not that easy to figure out the answer for directivity. You may have to do actual calculations. That's why I'm not doing other cases. You know that for a lambda by 2 dipole, radiation resistance is about 73 ohm. We have proven it. Right? So WR will be 73 into I effective square, where I effective is the RMS value of the input current. The value of E theta for lambda by 2 dipole is already known to us. So I'm plugging that in and I'm calculating the magnitude of E theta, which is supposed to be E. And I'm using RMS value of E. So I'm using I effective on the right hand side. This is what I get. You may recall this term cos pi by 2 cos theta divided by sin theta. This is the term that appears in E theta formula for lambda by 2 dipole. Magnitude of that and magnitude of the remaining term. They come together to give you E. Now you can double check. We'll see, we want only directivity. So that means let's go for maximum value of E and calculate directive gain in that direction. We'll get directivity. Rather than trying to get a general formula for GD, in this case, it is better to straight away shoot for the directivity. You can see by looking at the right hand side of equation 3, and if you want, you can prove it rigorously by differentiating the term cos pi by 2 cos theta divided by sin theta and equating it to 0 to see at what value of theta you'll get maximum. It turns out that that value is pi by 2. If you put theta equal to pi by 2, you'll get cos 0, which is 1. Just a minute. Theta equal to pi by 2 cos 0. Yeah. So you'll get cos 0 in the numerator and sin pi by 2 is 1. So you'll get 1 by 1. That will give you maxima, one of the maxima, the principal maximum at least, if not the other ones. So theta equal to pi by 2 is what we are going to use to calculate directivity. So if I put theta equal to pi by 2, I simply get E equal to eta naught I effective divided by 2 pi r. J goes out because we are taking magnitude. E to the power minus j beta r goes out because of taking only magnitudes. So E in the maximum direction, in the direction of maximum radiation, E is this much. So the radiation intensity is now derived using this formula by putting the E value calculated. I get radiation intensity in the direction of maximum radiation as this value, equation 6. Okay. Now gain is 4 pi divided by WR multiplied by radiation intensity. So 4 pi divided by 73 I effective square multiplied by eta naught I effective square divided by 4 pi. This simplifies, things cancel out. You get 120 divided by 73, which is almost 1.644. If you take 10 log of that, you get around 2.160 dB. Directivity of a lambda by 2 dipole is around 2.160 dB. That of a Hertzian dipole was 1.760 dB. So by increasing the length, we have got slightly better directivity. Directivity means ability of the antenna to concentrate the beam in a given direction. Okay. For a short dipole also, you'll see that the result is same as that for a Hertzian dipole. You can prove it yourself. Now, if the dipole length is other than lambda by 2 and dipole is long, directivity calculations cannot be done that easily. You have to do numerical calculations. Typically, MATLAB programs are written to figure out directivity in that case. So hopefully, at least you got exposed to the idea of gain, power gain, directive gain, and directivity, 3 different types of gains. You also know the concept of effective length. You also know the concept of half power beam width. Let me explain once again. It's probably not very readable, I know that. But important thing is this diagram. If the principal beam is along theta equal to pi by 2, on both sides, there will be theta values on which the value of E will fall to 0.707 of the maximum. So that range of theta values is known as 3 dB beam width or HPBW. As simple as that. Nothing else is new in this document. We'll do some numerical problems later on HPBW. One more concept before I close for today is that of effective area. Okay, these things are probably known to you already in the other document. Radiation intensity, I have already told you what it is. Things are repeated here. Okay. Yeah, these derivations are done in the previous document also. I've got two different documents for the same thing. But here I am including the concept of effective area, which was not there in the previous document. Yeah, here. Effective area, it is also known as effective aperture. It basically tells you how effective the antenna is in terms of capturing incoming signal. This concept is more applied to receiving antennas than to transmit antennas. But again, it is probably not a bad idea to apply it to either of them. Effective area, without bothering you too much, is related to directive gain by equation 1. There's a proof for it. Not doing it today for sure. If you know the directive gain of an antenna, simply multiply it by lambda square by 4 pi to get the effective. For an isotropic antenna, directive gain is 1, not in dB, actual value. So effective area will be simply lambda square divided by 4 pi. For receive antenna, another way of looking at effective area is if you know the value of pointing vector coming in and you know the total power received, then divide total power received by the pointing vector. You'll get something in meter square. That is supposed to be the effective area of the antenna or effective aperture of the antenna. It can be shown that equation 1 and 2 are equivalent to each other. For transmit antenna, maybe we'll use equation 1 to figure out A effective. For receive antenna, we might be interested in using equation 2. As long as polarization is appropriately chosen for the incident wave. What it means is the polarization of the transmit signal should be same as the polarization of the receiving antenna. We'll come to all that a little later. For now, we'll assume that condition. So there is no loss in signal strength because of mismatch in polarization. That's the assumption in these equations. Derive the formula for the effective aperture of a Hertzian dipole antenna and half-wave dipole antenna. We have just figured out the directivity values for both the cases. For Hertzian dipole, the directivity was 1.5. So the effective aperture will be lambda square divided by 4 pi into 1.5. Right here. So this is the formula. For lambda by 2 dipole, the directivity value was 1. Actually, it was 120 divided by 73. You can check in the previous talk. I think it was 1.644 approximately. So you again plug in that known value of directivity. Watch out here. Most of the time, people, instead of saying directive gain, they use the maximum value of directive gain, which is directivity. We assume that we are talking about direction of maximum radiation. That's why instead of directive gain, I'm putting directivity. That is the maximum value of effective aperture is being looked at by default. So this gives you a formula. You don't need to remember these formulas. Generally, we apply them intuitively. Now, if time permits, let me just give 2 minutes to this. I'll come back to it later. One kind of antenna which is very popular and you see it around you is a 2D antenna called parabolic dish, satellite dish. It is a paraboloid mounted on rooftops. Even in the institute, you will see it in several places. If the radiating aperture here is not 1D, it is a 2D aperture. If you look at the front of the paraboloid and project it on a 2D surface, you will see a circle. The radius of that circle, suppose it is, let's say diameter of that circle is small d, then the physical area of the radiating aperture will be pi by 4 into d square, area of the circle. That multiplied by some correction factor called eta aperture or aperture efficiency is going to give you the effective aperture of the parabolic dish. The practical value of eta aperture based on experiments has been found to be between 0.5 and 0.7 for most practical cases. Okay, this is how the parabolic dish looks like. You are assuming an imaginary circle which is representing the cross section of the construction. The diameter is small d. The effective aperture is written as eta aperture, which will be given to you, multiplied by the physical aperture, which is pi by 4 d square. And then you calculate the directivity by using the well-known formula, 4 pi A effective square by lambda.